Our next graph is called a Pareto chart, named after Vilfredo Pareto, a famous Italian engineer and mathematician who lived in the 1800s and early 1900s. So he made a special bar chart, and the bar chart has the frequency and relative frequency in decreasing order. Now, the advantage to this is that it's easier to see rank order. Rank order means who's first, who's second, who's third, and so on, right? So you can spot that more quickly when they're put into order for you. So it's easier to make comparisons. This one's the first one, that one's the fifth one, and so on. And when you make these in StatCrunch, I mean, they're really just regular bar charts, right? They're just bar charts that have been made special by putting them in an order that is descending. So you just make a bar chart, but tell StatCrunch when you're doing it that you want to order by values descending, and that's it. And again, these are real data for this example, so you're welcome to go look at them. This is a graph of the most common emergency room diagnoses in the US in 2022. And then this one is a graph of the number of books banned in school classrooms and libraries in the US from July 2023 to June 2024. All right, so how can you tell these are Pareto charts? Well, first of all, they're bar charts, right? Pareto charts are special bar charts. So the variables are qualitative, just like they were for a bar chart. These diagnoses are words, right? So variables, sorry, my B and L got mushed there. So the variables are qualitative, right? That makes it a bar chart. But it's a Pareto chart because not only are the variables are qualitative, but the frequency or relative frequency values are in decreasing order. Right? They go from the highest value to the lowest values. All right, so then one of these is a relative frequency bar chart. Which is it? So if I look here, it's this one, because this one is involving percents, right? Because this is percents, these are relative frequency, right? It won't always be percents, but percents is a really common one. Oops, I forgot my C and my frequency. There you go, frequency. My C and my Y kind of merged together into one letter here. One second. There you go. Okay, now what about this one? Well, this is number of. Number of, these are whole numbers. This is obviously frequency, in case you're interested. Okay, so which graph is the graph that's a relative frequency Pareto chart? They're both Pareto charts because they go in descending order and they're qualitative, but the relative frequency one is A. And you can tell because it's percents, right? Again, won't always be. They can be decimals as well. It's just common for a graph to have percents written. Now, what percent of ER diagnoses were for chest pain or shortness of breath? Okay, so we have to look through here. Chest pain is right there. So there's chest pain. Shortness of breath is right there. 7 and 6 makes 13. So this is 0.7% plus 0.6% would make 1.3%. And again, you can add those with a calculator if you wanted. I just know 7 and 6 makes 13, so this will be 1.3. Okay, now notice that was a percent question. So this was given in percent, so it was easy. Okay, what about if they give them to you as whole numbers? Well, then it's saying how many, right? How many is a frequency question, right? You can tell. So this is a frequency question. So it wants you to add up, oh, in this case, how many states, right? How many were more than 100? So more than 100 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Virginia, Wisconsin, Texas, Iowa, Florida. So 5 states. 5 states had more than 100 books banned. How many books were banned in total? Okay, well that again, actually that's more accurately a frequency question. So this is again frequency, right? So you're going to add up the frequencies for the whole group because in total means we want the whole sum. We want the whole addition of all of those numbers. Now this is a little tricky because there's a lot of numbers in there. So when you type it into Desmos, you have to be careful as you do it. So what I did was I typed and I kept typing and typing and typing, and you want to double check every number. I actually accidentally had this plus sign missing and it was making the answer wrong. So you have to be very careful as you type them. Right now, that's the only way we know how to do this. There is another way involving a spreadsheet program that we'll learn a little later, but for right now, that's our way. So 9712. We added them up. Okay, now the last question is asking for a percent. Percent is a relative frequency, right? So this one wants, I have to put an arrow in there, a relative frequency. And it wants it written as a percent. Okay, so we have to do a little more work here. Okay, so how to find this? Well, to start off, you take the number that are in your category, or categories, plural. In this case, it's just one category. It's Iowa, right? And we're going to divide by the total. So the number that were banned in Iowa was 3671. And we're going to divide it by the total, which we already found, which is 9712. Now that's a fraction, that's well and good, but that's not going to help us get to it. Well, it's going to help us, but it's not a percent. So we need to first find this as a decimal. So we're going to take 3671. We're going to divide by 9712. Oh, for the record, you can kind of move, when you're on a computer, not so much on your phone, but when you're on your computer Desmos, you can actually move this line wider and narrower depending on what you want. All right, and we see the decimal is 0.377985. That's, well, 986 actually, if we rounded that 6. Because the next number after the 5 is another 9. So, I mean, we could write all of this, but that's just silly. So we can see it's eventually only going to want one decimal place once it's in a percent. So we don't want all these decimals, but we'll just write a bunch of them for right now, more than we need. All right, so what we did was we went from fraction, which is a relative frequency, to a decimal, which is lovely. Now we have to turn that into a percent. So the way to move from decimals to percents are just decimals that are written special, right? You move the decimal one spot, two spots over, and it becomes 37.7986%. So now we have a percent, right? Percents are more how we speak about numbers. They're not generally how we use them in mathematical formulas, but there you have it. So you just move the decimal two spots over and you have a percent. But then it said it wanted one decimal place on that percent. So we would round to 37.8%. It's important to note that you want the one decimal place in the final result, not along the way. So I don't round this decimal to one decimal place. I round the percent that I get at the end to one decimal place. That's the path for moving from a fraction all the way to a percent, rounded percent at that. Of course, if you're very skilled at this and you've done this a lot of times, you can probably skip and do the rounding at the same time that you make the percent in the first place or something like that. But that's the general path that you would follow to turn a fraction into a percent that is rounded.